Just record and we'll get started. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to officially welcome you to the third Back to Operations webinar. This week we're going to talk about registration, so all our planning for the fall session, registration online, and things to consider when looking at this season that might be a little different than other seasons. And Melissa's going to start us off. She's going to start talking about online registration.
Great, thanks Sharon. Thank you everybody for coming today. So I am going to speak about online registration and moving towards that option for you guys at the club. In the current situation we find ourselves in, we are recommending, Skate Ontario is recommending that our clubs and schools move to an online registration system to limit the physical interactions for your members, for your volunteers, and for their families. Each interaction, physical interaction that you're out in the community, that type of thing increases exposure. So we're really just trying to minimize that exposure by providing a different avenue for you to run your registrations. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to speak specifically about Uplifter. That is the registration system that we use at Skate Ontario. There are other options, other companies, other softwares. I can't speak to those. So, but there are definitely other options if that's something that you guys want to consider. But for today's purposes, I'm going to be speaking about Uplifter. I'll start by saying we are not currently mandating clubs to move to online registration. It's just a recommendation. Again, safety for your members. It should be at the forefront of your thought process, plus also yourselves as volunteers. You know, you guys would be the ones out there doing a physical registration. So those are some things to be thinking about. And then also when it comes to a physical registration and in-person registration, what are the facility requirements, right? So each facility is going to have a little bit different process that you would have to follow and be in compliance with if you were going to proceed with an in-person. Things to think about that I'll kind of list a bunch of stuff that if you are going to proceed with an in-person, these are the types of things that you have to consider. So one being, you know, the PPE requirements, you know, masks, face shields for anybody coming into the facilities. The health screening, you know, that daily check of those 3 or 4 different questions that you're supposed to ask verbally. Is that something, you know, the facility does, or is that something that you're going to have a volunteer be asking your people coming in for the registration? You know, do you usually do your registrations in your office? Is that even a possibility at your facility now? Is your office space available? If not, where in the facility is that going to be? You know, tables, all of that type of stuff are things to be thinking about if you're going to be doing an in-person one, as well as you also have to consider and be sure that you're maintaining that physical distancing of 6 feet between people. Other things to be thinking about if you're in person is you need to disinfect, you know, clipboards, pens, tables, chairs between each registrant. So every time a person comes up, you're going to have to wipe everything down. That's an increase in the amount of time people are in the building. You know, there's also maybe a cost associated with that, with, you know, the products to disinfect with, plus potentially needing, you know, volunteers to be able to perform that task. So the amount of people that are then there is going to be increased. Other things to consider are, you know, flow of the facility. Are there entry and exit guidelines, similar to when we talked about that first webinar we talked on? These are all things that this process and these requirements are things that should be, if you're going to do an in-person, should be communicated out to your current members and posted on your website. So anybody who is coming to do an in-person registration, they know the process and they understand what it's going to look like should they come. That being said, that's a lot, right? So normally registrations, what you guys have for your regular registration, that's already, you know, can be, you know, a busy time, plus then having to add all these extra considerations for our current season coming up. This is why we're recommending you move to an online registration. It's a lot of time and commitment and potentially resources that you guys have to go through when you're doing this. So that's one of the reasons why we're recommending you guys move to an online registration system for this season. One of the benefits of moving to an online registration system is actually the elimination of some of that physical labor and intensive, inputting of data after a registration. So, right, so you take your physical paper registrations, you now have to record, people's email addresses or phone numbers, all that type of stuff. So who's doing that? In an online registration system with Uplifter, you actually have the parents create an account, and then they have put in their information for you. So that's a step that gets eliminated by using that you guys don't have to then be using or have somebody inputting that information. So it's eliminating that, and it's also ensuring that the specifically phone numbers and email addresses of your registrants for your oversight group. We had talked about that last week. In the case that there is, somebody, public health needs that information from the people, it's readily available for you on your online system. Again, virtual access to that information is another benefit to having an online registration for timeliness and it being all compiled into one. Again, you don't have to have physical storage of paper that way as well. It eliminates that storage. You're moving to a more green registration process. So these are things to be thinking about as benefits for moving to an online registration system. Something that Uplifter specifically has the benefit of, we've been working with them to create this, and I believe Jackie told me that it would be either late this week or early next week, they're gonna launch the ability to have a virtual waiver or a digital waiver. And this would be important when it comes to your Rowans Law legislation and your compliance with that. The ability for that is, as we've updated you guys, there are specific requirements depending on the age of your athlete and depending on the level your skater's at, whether it's just the parent that has to sign the waiver or if it's parent and skater. So this new feature that Uplifter will be releasing will allow for tracking of both the participant, so the skater themselves, and the parent, depending on the level of the skater. So that's something to be that's a big consideration because we all went through Rowans Law last year, and there was a lot of paperwork that had to be done. So that having that ability to do that online is a benefit for you guys. I saw that somebody says the cost of Uplifter. I just saw a question. So there is a couple different options for Uplifter. There is it's called Uplifter Lite, which is their free version. There's processing fees. So anytime somebody uses a credit card or something like that, there would be a processing fee that's associated with it, but you don't have a monthly or a yearly subscription to the software. So that is their baseline. And then they have other packages that you can look into. And I'll let Jackie talk about that later on at the end in more detail if there's more questions regarding that. Again, this online version of stuff, an online registration system, it allows you to also have other policies. So if you have a skater code of conduct, if you have registration or refund policies, those types of things, it allows you to add those in with your registration so that people are aware, they read them, and they can acknowledge that they accept. So these are benefits that come from an online registration system that we really want you guys to consider taking advantage of. So I guess in summary, what we're trying to get out of this online, pushing this online registration is the ability for you guys to have centrally located information that's accessible. When it was, in physical copy, do you even have access to your offices right now, right? So where is that information going to be stored? Is it going to be stored at somebody's house, right? So these are all things to consider with the online. It's all virtually stored. You don't have to have physical copies. So it eliminates, a lot of storage needs. So moving forward, you can have less need for filing cabinets and all those types of things moving forward. And it's really about the accessibility of the information this year is the really big thing for your oversight group. So having that contact information readily available for them to be able to access to, to give to public health in the case that they're needed, is one of the really big things that we need to consider this year. And it's makes it easier for you guys to be able to manage that through an online process. So yeah.
Melissa, there's just one question here about the waiver as well. Vicky's asking here if it can be part of the registration.
So I am not sure about if it can be part of the registration. We did get confirmation today, and it's something that we are working on. We are working on developing an electronic form. There still needs, with the digital signature and that type of thing, this is something that we are working on and creating at Skate Ontario. I don't know what that means, if it would be integrated into your registration. I'd have to confirm that with my bosses. But that's definitely something that we are looking into. Perfect.
Perfect. All right, we're moving on.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about registration fees. So we're at a point now where we're starting to think, well, I'm sure some of you are far ahead of me, but we're starting to think about the registration fees for the fall. As you know, this year's different. So there's all sorts of things that we need to think about when we're thinking about those fees. Your costs might change. There might be difference in numbers. There's all sorts of things. So what we have done is we're recommending that you review your club budget and current fee structure, taking into account COVID considerations. So what that means is we need to step back and figure out what's going to be different this year. We won't really know until we get there, but there's definitely things we need to start thinking about now. We put together a list of items items and questions, should I say, that go over some of the things we should think about. So first off, registration numbers. So when we think about registration numbers, typically we have an idea of what we had last year and the year before, or what seems to be the trend of our numbers to plan for the season. For this year, they might be different from previous seasons. So definitely ask that questions. Will they be different? If you're looking at your club demographics, are there families that may have had a change in income from COVID-19? And let's figure out if that might affect your registration. So that's one big piece. This may affect your area, it may not. It may be huge. So we need to start thinking about those types of things. With the current gathering limits, will it affect your session size? Right now, we're sitting at 10. It's probably going to affect your session size. Of course, we are assuming that those numbers will go up by the time we start our fall sessions. But as it stands right now with 10, this includes our coaches and our skaters. So how will that affect your registration? If we open today, what type of numbers will you have? What are the costs to the skaters? What would be the registration? Okay. It's, like I said, we're assuming that the numbers will go up, but we need to think about smaller numbers as well. I'm going to come back to this. What about interest? With physical distancing and the changes to everyone's day-to-day operations, do you foresee that there might be skaters or parents that might not be comfortable returning to the rink? We're all in a different place with COVID, and you'll find some might be hesitant to come back. Some are gung-ho and are already on the ice, and others are on the fence. So when you're looking at your numbers, it's important to look at that type of projection to see if there's anybody that may not be coming back this season since they're not comfortable. Session cost. If the cost of your session needs to increase because of numbers or because of ice cost or whatnot, will your membership be able to adapt to that change? Is the increase too much for them? Is there a line? Is there a limit that you might need to set on your fee increase to make it work for your session? Just be mindful that any fee increase and how it might affect your numbers. And if you need to make the decision to increase your registration, you'll have to consider how that might affect the enrollment. So if you may have less enrollment due to fee increase. We know that from year to year, that if we increase the fees, we either get complaints because the fees went up, even if it was just 2%, or people won't come back. So there's always a value associated with that. So we need to make sure that our fees are within reason. Next thing to consider is ice cost. Have they changed the ice cost at your arena? I've heard of one or two that have changed the ice costs at the arena for this season. Some of that might just be a normal increase. There's lots of facilities that are increasing year by year, sometimes a very large percent. Seems to be the trend. Is it changing in your area? So how will that affect it? Is your local arena going to open in the fall? We had a webinar, was it last week we did facilities? Yes, last week, 2 weeks ago, we did facilities. You'll need to start that conversation to see if they're going to open or when, what their time frame is. It may be a couple weeks later. They may need some extra preparation. So we definitely need to look into that. If your facility isn't opening, is there an alternate? Is there somewhere that you can go? And what is the fee difference to what you're using in your regular facility? We're finding a lot of people right now that are using the private rinks are paying a lot more than they would normally in their municipal rinks. So that's something definitely to start thinking about with our numbers. Okay. So with that, there may be time allotted in your ice booking for cleaning. So we've hit on that a couple times over our webinar series, that there may be cleaning times. I would expect a time allotted during your session. So if you normally book the ice for an hour, there may be a 10 to 20 minute cleaning period set into that cost. We've heard different things. Some arenas are charging the clubs for the full hour. So you're paying for the cleaning time, and some that is excluded. You pay for your 50 minutes and the 10 minutes is not charged for. So that's something to consider as, again, we need to have value in our sessions. So we might have to be looking at different ways to ensure that we're using our time efficiently. That could be using the time for off ice. It could be that we're reducing session times and doing half of it off ice with our skaters and half of it on ice and splitting the session up to get more numbers on it. There are definitely options that we can start looking into. Having said that, in 2 weeks, we're going to do a programming webinar, and we're going to cover some of the session options that we can think about for using our time efficiently on the ice and off the ice, and maximizing the number of people that we can get at the rink during an hour period. Okay, so that's definitely something. Coaching. Next thing is coaching. Are all your coaches going to return? Again, comfort level. There may be some coaches that are not ready to come back to the rink. So we need to think about that in our numbers. And the other side of that is with our gathering size restrictions. Can we have all of the coaches on the ice we may normally have had and still get the registration we need to be financially feasible? So there's some things we need to think about there with respect to our staff and the gathering sizes. So when you're planning your class time or your club run program time, will the number of coaches be the same? For example, if the gathering size, let's say the gathering size is 30. So we're moving into the fall, we're thinking about our Can Skate program. Our gathering size is set at 30. This would include our coaches, our PAs, and our skaters. So let's think best case, and you only have one coach. So to maximize your skaters, you might have one coach and 4 PAs, which would leave you 25 skaters. So when we look at those gathering sizes, we have to think about what the skater number will be as opposed to the number that is in the gathering size. So, because that will affect your registration cost. That session, you may have had 4 coaches before. Can we put 4 coaches on that session and still have enough skaters to pay for the session? So there's, again, we're going to come back to this in programming, but start thinking about that in your sessions, because we will need to know how many coaches you can use to run the program efficiently with physical distancing and gathering size considerations included. Okay. Could there be coaches on the ice and off the ice at the same time? So we had talked about the possibility of maybe running off ice and on ice during the same hour. You may do this already, or it might be a change. But if you're booking your coach time, you might have coaches off the ice now working part of the session and coaches on the ice, which might increase your cost. So that's something else that we need to think about. So what we suggest is that you start to play with your session numbers. So use, and the reason we say this is you need to figure out, not we, you need to figure out if the club will be financially set depending on the different session sizes and enrollment. So what that means is we need to use a variety of gathering sizes and session sizes to figure out if it'll work. For example, I would plan all your sessions with a max of 20. Plan all your sessions with a max of 30, plan all your sessions with a max of 40. Figure out the different scenarios that can come in. If there's 2 coaches on the ice, or if you have 3 coaches, or if it's a 1 coach session, and how that will change. There's so many things to consider. And of course, we don't know what will happen. So the more we plan and think about how this is going to work, we won't be surprised. The mission is we want all clubs to be set and happy and running in future seasons. So if things need to change this year to accommodate for COVID considerations, that's okay, right? Being financially feasible for future seasons is more important than being normal this season. There's all sorts of things that aren't normal right now. So it's okay if your skating sessions aren't normal right now as well. If you are having trouble with the money or the numbers or the session sizes, consider working with other clubs in your area. This is a great time to find a partnership with someone around. I understand that many people are their only club within 4 hours. So that obviously doesn't work, but there are also many clubs that are within an hour of each other that could possibly combine forces. For example, if your star skate numbers are low, maybe you'll only book 1 hour of star skate per week, and you share an hour with another club, so that you are keeping your fees down. Your kids still can skate, plus they're making new friends. There's all sorts of advantages to that. So with this season in your planning, financially viable is important. Everybody wants to get back on the ice, and we of course want that. We want everybody skating. We want the clubs to be full. We want operating and happy. Having said that, with respect to the money, it might be a challenge this year. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about pairing up with another club. Let's talk about possibly reducing hours if you need to, or reducing the session offerings. So maybe there is just 1 can skate session so that you get some of the kids out on the ice, as opposed to educating the whole town learning to skate for this season. Because we know many of us use can skate as that catalyst to bring money into the club and support our star programs. So if the numbers are too low and you can't make money on it, are you able to continue to run those star programs? So let's find ways to make that work. The one other thing that I want to say is that you can also give yourself the opportunity to delay your start. 1, to get yourself organized. 2, to make your session a little bit smaller, so that your fee structure can be smaller visually for parents when they're registering. So you could delay a couple of weeks, or you could delay till January, depending on where you sit. But just make sure you give yourself your options. Okay, where are we at here, Melissa?
I think there's just a couple questions. Is can skate expected to be back in the fall?
I would definitely plan on can skate in the fall. I should say definitely plan, but I would plan for the fall. That is certainly where we're gearing. We're trying to get everything up and going and ready for the fall. So I would definitely plan for that.
And then how is the program design going to be different to incorporate social distancing?
So in the webinar that we're going to do in 2 weeks, you may have seen the resources we published last week. There is a document for Can Power Star 1 to 4 and customized programs. They include all the minimum delivery standards for those programs with some COVID considerations. So you'll find those on the Return to Play Return to Play box in the COVID page, and they're just, if you scroll down to the bottom, they're at the bottom there. Use those. For Can Skate, that one's coming out. That one is a little bit more work as we have more resources to help. Those are larger sessions, and there's more considerations that we need to add in. So those will be ready for the webinar on the 22nd.
Perfect. Those are all the questions.
Perfect.
Alrighty. So I am going to now talk about participant tracking. this is a major piece of our return to play protocols, and for the safety of your members. We've had a couple different people ask about an app for participant tracking, and I can speak specifically to Uplifter. I believe it's on their bronze package or higher, so that is the paid version of Uplifter. There is an attendance tracking feature that you can do on the software. That being said, the light version, which is what I talked about earlier, you don't pay the fee for the software. There is the ability to pull the registrants list for your sessions, and that can be pulled into an Excel spreadsheet, which then you can have it on your phone as a coach and be checking people off on ice, or it can be printed off and you can physically do that. Sorry, I had a little bit of a tickle. Talking dries your throat out. The really big important thing here with the participant tracking is finding a system that works for your club. Each of you is unique in the makeup, and whether you have an administrator who's there doing stuff, whether it's just your coaches doing stuff online or on ice, need to find and create a process that works for you and makes sense for you. I know currently there's definitely some clubs that are up and running and they have their administrators there working with them, and there's other clubs that they're not running as a club. They've given their sanction to their coaches to be able to rent ice and take skaters on the ice. So working with your coaches to see what they've done, how the process is, and making sure that there's a cohesive process and that everybody is getting that information. The big important thing is that those session tracking with the participants need to be in the hands of your oversight group and your club, right? In the case that public health needs access to those. So it's finding and working a process that makes sense for you is really where this is coming down to. Having it available online versus, hard copy is going to be more readily available and be probably better managed. But again, it's something that you have to work with your coaches and work as a board to decide what is the best practice for you guys at the club. So yeah, that's it on session tracking.
Perfect. We're going to open it up for Uplifter. We have Jackie here. Jackie, you can come back for us. Does anybody have any questions for Jackie pertaining to Uplifter? We had the one from the beginning about cost. If you could help out with that one.
Sure, not a problem. So first of all, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good, just making sure. So yes, we do have a couple of different levels of Uplifter. So, and we've structured it because we know that there's clubs of all different sizes. And so our payment provider, Bambora, has a product where they just charge for their credit card fees. And they said to us, do you have something that you can put together that you don't charge anything for, that if people want to take credit cards, they can. So we've put together this one option called Uplifter Lite. We don't charge anything for the software. It's basically a stripped down version of our online registration software. And it's connected to a Bambora credit card account, so that if you want to take credit card payments, you certainly can. There are lots of other options, because we know that we've run into a lot of clubs that are very small that don't, and even just with the unsurety and uncertainty of where things are going and how much money as a club that you can make, we understand that there's challenges there. So we have lots of options within Uplifter that if you still want to use Uplifter as an administrator, you can create invoices and you don't have to take credit cards if you don't want to. Other options can be as well if you want to set up sort of an installment plan where a person might not need to have to pay money right off the bat, especially if you're not 100% sure if you can secure your ice for September 15th or whatever that date is. Maybe you just want to take all the online registrations and set your first installment payment date to be like September 15th or October 1st, closer to when you're going to take, actually have people on the ice. And if you want to set it so that people are paying you by check or by email money transfer so that you can reduce some of those credit card fees, you certainly can. So options to allow you to sort of reduce the fees of how much that online processing is going to take. From there, we actually have a bronze and a silver and a gold package. Again, all of those basically give you a few more features depending on how large your club is and how much you want to use. But that gives you everything from attendance tracking to evaluation tracking. Our policy management features are available on all of our tiers, so that gives you full visibility to be able to track waivers, online waivers for Rowans Law, and if you're able to take digital signatures for the COVID not assessment, but the acknowledgement. You certainly can use Uplifter to do that if your organization deems that a digital acceptance is okay. But bronze, we have our fees that start at just $29 a month with no transaction charges. Silver, which gives you a little bit more robustness, quite a few more features in terms of achievement tracking, evaluation tracking, CANSGATE tracking. We've actually even used it for, clubs are using it for verbal health assessments. So you can actually put in a COVID health assessment and just track that you've asked every skater, do you have a cough? Do you have a fever? Have you been in touch with anybody who you know has COVID? You can track that on a per session basis, just like you would track your CANSGATE evaluations. So that's available on our silver plan, which is $145 a month. And then our gold plan, we actually have probably the best plan for our skating clubs, large and small, is our gold plan, where you kind of pay as you go. It's $25 a month, and then we just charge a 1% transaction fee for any transactions that you put through. So again, it just kind of grows with your club. So if you're able to take a lot of registrations, then we charge you for that volume that you're using with Uplifter. If you're not able to, you just have to pay us the $25 a month so that we can keep the servers on and help you guys out from a support side. So lots of different options there. Another feature that I just wanted to mention, Sharon was mentioning how you kind of have to vary your possible program size and figure out, what's your capacity going to be like. A great thing about Uplifter is you can set it up so that your programs could actually be set up to go to waitlist immediately. Like, let's say that you can secure 4 hours of ice a day, but you're not sure if you're going to have enough interest to get 5 or 6 hours. So you can set up a couple of sessions that you just set directly to waitlist and see how many people sign up. Just see how many people are actually going to come back. And if you get to that point where it's like, oh, I got 6, that's going to pay for my ice. Great. Then you open up registration then, and you can use Uplifter to play with those numbers, especially if gathering sizes start to increase over time. You can just go into Uplifter and say, oh, we can now have 30 kids on the ice as opposed to 20. Just change your caps to 30. Anybody who was on the wait list will automatically be able to register from then on. And so a lot of that manual process of figuring out, can I put these kids on the ice? Can I not put these kids on the ice? Who wants to register? Uplifter will manage a lot of that for you in the back end. So
that's great. Thank you, Jackie. Is there any more questions
problem.
from the group? I don't see any in chat here right now.
One thing I will mention is we are, for people that do have some questions about Uplifter or want to learn more about Uplifter, we actually run every Friday at noon, we run a session on Facebook Live called our Feature Friday. This Friday, we're actually going to be talking about our new feature that we're going to be launching in terms of online digital waivers and policies. We've always allowed people to accept policies online, but the refinements that we're adding will allow you to better track Rowans Law and certain elements that you might want to track with COVID. We're going to be doing a Feature Friday on that, previewing that feature that we're going to be launching next week. We're going to be doing that this Friday, so feel free to join us on Facebook Live.
Perfect. Thank you, Jackie. All right, Melissa's going to tell us about next week's webinar, and then we'll send you off on your way.
Yeah, so next week we have our communications plan and policies webinar. We're gonna have Claire Beauchamp, our manager of communications and branding at Skate Ontario. She's gonna come in and discuss the process for creating and implementing your club and school communications plan. And there'll be that COVID consideration as part of that club response plan that we talked about last week. She'll be able to speak about a bunch of those, and obviously, you know, a communications plan that you can utilize for years to come as well. We're going to be releasing a policies and procedures resource on Monday that will also go through on the webinar. So yeah, that's next week. So next Wednesday. So look forward to seeing you guys all there.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Thank you everybody for coming today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to come talk with us or listen to us as we prepare to get back to the ice in the fall. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.